Okay, so it's 8:05. I will begin the introduction. So, good morning, afternoon, and evening, venerables, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Pali and Sanskrit International Buddhist Community. This is the first of our series of forums to bring eminent venerables and scholars to share and guide us in the practice of the Dhamma through the eyes of the Pali and Sanskrit Buddhist tradition. We hope to create a greater understanding and appreciation of both Buddhist tradition through such a meaningful and wonderful forum. This forum is a collaboration of the Southeast Asia Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama with the Tibetan Buddhist Center Singapore and the Tibetan Buddhist Culture Center Malaysia, and is supported by the Theravada Buddhist Council of Malaysia and numerous Buddhist organizations. If you have any question during this conference, please post your questions on the group chat. I'd like now to invite Sister Frank to give the introduction in Thai. Sister Frank.
สวัสดีทุกท่านนะคะที่เข้าร่วมฟังการสัมมนาการใช้ชีวิตอย่างตื่นรู้นะคะซึ่งเป็นการเรียนรู้จากคำสอนของพระพุทธองค์ผ่านสายธรรมของบาลีและสันสกฤตนะคะขั้นตอนการรับฟังการสัมมนาเป็นภาษาไทยนะคะให้ทุกท่านคลิกไปที่ interpretation นะคะตรงที่เป็นรูปโลกนะคะเมื่อคลิกเข้าไปเนี่ยก็จะเห็นในเวอร์ชันของภาษาอังกฤษและภาษาไทยนะคะให้คลิกเลือกที่ภาษาไทยได้เลยค่ะส่วนคำถามในตอนสุดท้ายนะคะท่านไหนที่มีคำถามก็ให้พิมพ์คำถามเป็นภาษาไทยได้แล้วเดี๋ยวทางทีมงานจะแปลเป็นภาษาอังกฤษให้ค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
Thank you, sister. I'm happy to invite Venerable Associate Professor Rangama Chandawimala as our moderator for this evening forum. The theme of the forum is Patient Khanti. Venerable is a Sri Lankan Buddhist monk who received higher ordination in 1989. He graduated from the University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka in Buddhist philosophy with honors in 1994 and obtained SMA from the same university in 1997. Venerable also received MA and PhD in Buddhist studies from the University of Hong Kong in 2003 and 2008 respectively. Currently, Venerable is serving as an associate professor at the Buddhist College of Singapore at Komeng Monastery. Venerable field of interest covers early Buddhism, Buddhist philosophy, and Buddhist history. And Venerable latest publication is Heterodox Buddhism, the School of Abhayagiri. So, Bhante, can I invite you to moderate the session?
Hi, Bhante. I need to unmute yourself first.
Bhante, you need to unmute. Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Brother Wilson. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. Namo Buddhaya to all of you. Venerable Sirs of the Mahasangha, dear professors, friends in the Dhamma. Now at this moment, we are going to have our special Buddhist forum today. As Brother Wilson gave a short introduction, today we are holding this special Buddhist forum with the collaboration work of several Buddhist organizations, especially the Tibetan Buddhist organization, the traditions. And today, this community, actually we call as a special name for this community of people who are working here, Pāli-Sanskrit International Buddhist Community. So the topic today is the patience in Buddhism, a strength for modern living. What is the reason for us to select a kind of topic which is very important especially in the modern day. Basically, the theme of this Pali and Sanskrit International Buddhist Community is the living an awakened life, learning the Buddha's teaching from both the Pali and Sanskrit Buddhist traditions and the text. So therefore, as Buddhist, as Buddhist educators, we all together actually work for enlightened people who are interested in Buddhism, no matter whether they are Buddhist or non-Buddhist. So we are here for that purpose. Especially today, my duty is to give a short introduction to this forum. Basically, this forum, especially based on two texts. In the Pali tradition or the Theravada Buddhist tradition, we have the Visuddhimagga, and also representing the Sanskrit Buddhist tradition, we have selected the Bodhicharyavatara. As you all know, the Visuddhimagga is an exegetical Pali text composed by Venerable Buddhaghosa in the 5th century CE in Sri Lanka at the Mahavihara monastery, the great monastery. So this Visuddhimagga is basically a text which deals with meditation, but however, it is considered as a compendium work or a short text actually covering all the aspects of Buddhism. Sometimes we considered it as an encyclopedia for Buddhism. When Venerable Achalo, our first speaker, when he gives his talk, probably he will give a short introduction to this text as well. So I don't want to spend much time on this. However, there are a lot of, comments or the views or various definitions on the Visuddhimagga, but it is not the time to explain you everything. However, this text is considered as the third text, independent text written by Venerable Buddhaghosa. So the Visuddhimagga has been translated, into English is titled The Path of Purification. The Path of Purification. According to Venerable Buddhaghosa, here the Visuddhi means the purification. Magga means the paths. So this text leads for the nirvana. Those who practice the Dhamma, so they can use this text as a guidance and also as a text to explore their knowledge in Buddhism, since it is something like an encyclopedic work to Theravada Buddhism. And this is what I say about the Visuddhimagga. Now we will go to the next text, the Bodhicharyavatara. The Bodhicharyavatara was written by Venerable Shantideva, Master Shantideva. You can call him Bodhisattva Gunakara, Bodhisattva Gunakara Shantideva from India. He composed this text, according to the scholars, maybe between the late part of the 7th century and the early part of the 8th century CE. The Bodhicharyavatara basically deals with the Bodhisattva practice in the Mahayana tradition. We all know that in the Mahayana tradition, each and every practitioner is considered as a bodhisattva. So they should work for their enlightenment through the practice of the bodhisattva path. So in the Bodhicharya Avatara, Venerable Shantideva has explained the whole practice of the Mahayana Buddhism as a devoted and also a very dedicated bodhisattva, how he should consider him as a bodhisattva and which way that he carry on his bodhisattva career and as a practitioner or the bodhisattva who is going to serve the whole world or to save the whole beings according to the perspective of the Mahayana Buddhism. All right. So if we need some more introduction to the text, the things will be, coming later. At this time, without wasting much time, so I have to introduce our first speaker, our first resource person today. So, Brother Wilson, is it time to introduce Venerable, or you have something to say?
No, Venerable, please introduce Ajahn Achalo.
All right, thank you very much. So today we have two speakers, Venerable Ajahn Achalo and Venerable Dr. Barry Kerzin. So these two venerables actually representing two Buddhist traditions. So Venerable Achalo is representing the Theravada Buddhist tradition, and the Venerable Dr. Barry Kerzin, and he is representing the Sanskrit Buddhist tradition. Basically, yeah, we can simply call that Mahayana Buddhist tradition, but Venerable is belong to the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. So first of all, I will introduce our first speaker, Venerable Ajahn Achalo, in brief. So Venerable Achalo was born in Australia in 1972 and went forth as a bhikkhu at Wat Non Forest Monastery. So we call it Wat Prananachat, and it's a very famous temple, especially for the foreign monks in Thailand. So actually, this Wat Prananachat or Wat Nong Pa Pong Forest Monastery is representing this tradition of Venerable Ajahn Chah. And he is one of the very famous masters, Theravada masters in the world, having millions of followers in Thailand and outside of Thailand. And a lot of Buddhists, especially the foreign monks, get ordination under Ajahn Chah's lineage, especially in this Ubon Rajdhani province, northeast Thailand. So Venerable Achalo entered this Buddhist order in 1997. So his teachers include Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Pasanno, and Ajahn Anand, and Ajahn Jaisoro, very famous Theravada Buddhist monks in the world today. And he currently lives in Anandagiri Forest Monastery in Phetchabun province in northern Thailand. Ajahn Achalo is a Dhamma educator and a great preacher, and he is well known among Theravada community in the East and the West. Ajahn is free from sectarian barriers. Yeah, nowadays this is a very important thing. He's free from sectarian barriers. Being a Theravada monk, he is interested in Mahayana and Vajrayana teachings as well. Over the years, Venerable Achalo has also attended His Holiness Dalai Lama's teaching on around 15 occasions. So you can understand that how much he is interested in Sanskrit Buddhism. In the USA, in Australia, in Bodh Gaya, and other places around the world, he is having a close relationship with His Holiness Dalai Lama. Today, Ajahn is going to talk about patience in Pali Buddhist tradition with a special reference to the Visuddhimagga of Venerable Buddhaghosa. So without spending much time, so I'm going to invite Venerable Ajahn Achalo now to deliver his talk, and we are very thankful and grateful for accepting our invitation, Venerable Sir. Thank you. This is your time. Yes.
Thank you very much for your kind and warm introduction, Bhante Chandawimala. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Homage to the Blessed, Noble, and Perfectly Enlightened One. So I'll give a little bit of, I think before I dive in, I might just mention, I just have a half an hour, and we have quite a bit of content to potentially cover. And the organizers explained to me that their main objective, there are several, the main objective is to introduce people to these wonderful texts as a reference for people to do further study in the future. And then also there is the request to focus a little bit upon the subject of patience. And there was also a request to try to make it practical and relevant. So that's it's a bit of a creative challenge, but I will try. So Bhadantacharya Buddhaghosa was a bhikkhu from southern India who lived about towards the end of the 4th and the beginning of the 5th century, I believe. So about 900 years after Lord Buddha's enlightenment and about 1600 years ago, he traveled to Sri Lanka and he stayed at what was known as the Great Monastery, which is, I believe, the monastery where the Arahant daughter of King Asoka planted the Bodhi tree in Anuradhapura, the royal capital. And he studied with one teacher there. His name was Acharya Buddha Mitta. And the Sutta Pitaka, the Tipitaka had gone to Sri Lanka in Pali since King Asoka's son and daughter went there. But the commentaries were written and explained in Sinhalese, which would make sense. They're wanting the people to be able to study and understand them. So there were hallowed and extensive commentaries in Sri Lanka from the earlier period of Buddhism written in Sinhalese. And Buddhaghosa Bhikkhu was an expert in Pali, but he studied Sinhalese and he studied these ancient commentaries, and he undertook the task of kind of condensing this huge body of works to make it, as Bhante was explaining before, like a Buddhist encyclopedia, an important reference manual. And he tried to cut out unnecessary repetition. He wanted it to be as exhaustive and as extensive as it is with regards to the subjects that it covers. He tried to make it concise so that it would be practical. So this concise manual of practical Dhammas in the current English translation is about 750 pages long. So it was a heroic work that he did do. And it was an important text for the regeneration of the Pali tradition. So Buddhism over the centuries, there's sometimes the Pali tradition has received more support and been revered. Other times the Sanskrit tradition in various areas has there's normal kind of waxing and waning, but this text holding up the Pali and referring to original sources was very helpful in regenerating faith and respect for the Pali teachings in the Sutta Pitaka, the Vinaya Pitaka, and the Abhidhamma, also the commentaries. I just want to mention a few of the meditation subjects that are mentioned. There are many, but I just want to mention as a way of introducing what is in the text. So there is the instructions on breath meditation, Anapanasati, which Lord Buddha described as the crown jewel of all meditations. There is the recollection of the qualities of Lord Buddha, which is one of the anusatis, Buddha Anusati. There is the cultivation of the 4 Brahma Viharas, the loving kindness, compassion, empathic joy, equanimity, and the jhanas, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th jhanas, and descriptions about how to go about practicing in order to develop these. And then there's the 6th to the 8th jhanas. That's the infinite base of space, the infinite base of consciousness, infinite base of nothingness, and neither perception or non-perception. One particular type of meditation that I wanted to, or contemplation that I wanted to mention, was the charnel ground contemplation, where Ajahn Buddhaghosa, Vedantacharya Buddhaghosa, explains this practice of going to a cemetery and actually observing the way that bodies degenerate. And the reason I wanted to mention that this practice is explained in the text is because of my studying with my teachers, all of the people that Bhante Chandawimala mentioned, and Tanajan Anan. And when we read the biographies of Lumpur Cha, Lumpur Man, his teacher, and my teachers and his contemporaries, body contemplation seems to have been in this last period of time a major practice that led to actual realization and liberation in this day and age. So I wanted to talk to that as I'm representing the living meditation tradition of the forest monks in Thailand. I just wanted to mention that those practices are practiced to this day, and particularly when the water element oozes away and the flesh is eaten by the animals and things, and that all that remains is bones. This seeing, when the practitioner, the meditator becomes skilled and adept at holding the awareness of the elements just as the element and seeing those bones as earth element, that seems to be a particularly potent practice for having the insight into not self, because it's a lot of identification with the body. But when we train ourselves to be able to see the body as made up of elements, and we train the mind to be able to hold the awareness of that element in mind, that seems to have been a very potent, liberating tool in recent Thai forest Buddhism. I know my own teacher practiced in charnel grounds and did have very deep insights while doing death meditation, body contemplation, the charnel ground contemplation. So that's in the Visuddhimagga. Another practice which is mentioned is the contemplation of death, Marananusati. And so the Visuddhimagga also describes which practices will lead to what's called neighborhood concentration, which means almost absorption. It's a very wholesome mind state, only wholesome thoughts, very peaceful, but not the absorbed state. And it explains which contemplations do lead to the absorption states. And it explains which practices can develop insight. So for someone who is interested in the practical work of Chitta Bhavana, the mental cultivation, it's a very practical manual, which practices will get which results. It also describes the positive and negative conditions that Negative conditions that will obstruct one's practice, positive conditions that will support one's practice. So it's very practical, pragmatic, and profound. With regards talking about patience, I want to talk from the section where Buddhaghosa is explaining the cultivation of loving kindness, Brahma Vihara. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs as an introduction to the text and some interesting themes. The four divine abidings were mentioned next to the recollections as meditation subjects. They are loving kindness. So just to mention chapter 6, the first subject in chapter 6, the divine abidings. They are loving kindness, compassion, gladness, and equanimity. A meditator who wants to develop firstly loving kindness among these, if he is a beginner, should sever the impediments and learn the meditation subject. Then, when he has done the work connected with the meal and got rid of any dizziness due to it, he should seat himself comfortably on a well-prepared seat in a secluded place. To start with, he should review the danger in hate and the advantages in patience. So there's an instruction here to look at the drawbacks of the negative qualities that affect the mind. There's the root kilesa of hatred. Just mention that this paragraph was addressed to bhikkhus. So there's the instruction about having the meal, not overeating so that it doesn't lead to drowsiness, finding a suitable secluded place, contemplating the drawbacks of essentially not having much loving kindness. He should seat himself comfortably on a well-prepared seat in a secluded place. To start with, he should review the danger in hate and the advantage in patience. Why? Because hate has to be abandoned and patience attained in the development of this meditation subject. And he cannot abandon unseen dangers and attain unknown advantages. Now, the danger in hate should be seen in accordance with such suttas as this. Friends, when a man hates, is a prey to hate, and his mind is obsessed by hate, he kills living things. And the advantage of patience should be understood according to such suttas as this. No higher rule, the Buddhists say, than patience, and no nibbana higher than forbearance. So that, I believe, is a translation of a verse from the Awada Patimokkha, teaching that Lord Buddha gave in the bamboo grove when he first initiated the Vinaya tradition. And there are different ways of translating these Pali sentences. And I have a couple of other ways I'd like to mention that we can explain it. So that first line in the Awada Patimokkha that Lord Buddha addressed to the 1,250 arahants that spontaneously gathered in the bamboo grove, which we celebrate as Magha Puja. Kanti paramang tapo titika. Patient endurance is the ultimate asceticism. This is the very first line that Lord Buddha chose to say in this, when he introduced the training rules. The training rules were introduced first as a series of statements about the attitude that a samana, one gone forth as a bhikkhu, should have. The very first sentence is, patient endurance is the ultimate asceticism. In Thai, this phrase is translated asเป็นเครื่องเผากิเลสอย่างยิ่งการอดกลั้นเป็นเครื่องเผากิเลสอย่างยิ่ง which means patient endurance is the supreme incinerator of defilements, which is I prefer that translation. And in terms of being practical, so the instructions about loving kindness, they continue with one develops loving kindness for oneself as a conventional being. One trains in stages to develop more loving kindness to beings for which it is easy to have loving kindness towards. One then develops loving kindness for larger numbers of neutral beings. One then develops the capacity to have loving kindness for beings for whom it is difficult to have loving kindness towards, being with negative qualities, beings with whom one has difficult relationships, and then ultimately all sentient beings everywhere. But the very beginning, once again, it's very interesting. When Lord Buddha spoke the Yawada Patimokkha in the bamboo grove, the first monastery, and he first established the Vinaya instructions, he starts with patient endurance is the supreme asceticism. When Buddhaghosa Bhikkhu is explaining how to cultivate loving kindness, he says, first of all, you need to understand that you're going to need patience. So we've got Lord Buddha himself, and then we've got this very wonderful learned practitioner essentially saying, there's a few things, isn't there? We need to be making effort. We need to be being determined. And then within that, we need to be patient. In terms of how do we do this in our daily life? I personally feel that we need to meditate. I'm representing the meditation tradition, so let me suggest that we all meditate. As Buddhist practitioners, there is the pariyatti and the patipatti. There is the study, and then there is the putting into practice the study. And this is what Buddhaghosa Bhikkhu, Bhadanta Acharya Buddhaghosa, he gave us this incredible treaty, this incredible encyclopedia, which explains all of these wonderful meditation tools that Lord Buddha gave to us. Why did he do that? I believe he wants us to meditate. He's not going to all of this effort so that we just study it. He explains to find a peaceful and secluded place. He explains not to overeat. These are also teachings in the Yawada Patimokkha Lord Buddha taught. So it's very clear that he keeps referring to these central teachings. My personal recommendation to people, having been involved in teaching a good number of people for over a decade, my recommendation is to do the practice first thing in the morning, whatever your meditation practice is. So some people, especially in Southeast Asia, tend to stay up quite late because it's nicer when the weather is cooler, but it's good to go to bed a little bit earlier so that you can get up a little bit earlier. And the reason I suggest practicing in the morning, because I have experience of talking with a lot of people, and I ask them when they meditate, and 9 out of 10 people say just before sleeping. And this isn't going to bring the best results. People have had busy days and have done many, many things, and they're tired. And then if they do get some nice results from their meditation, they're going to have a nice sleep. But they're not necessarily going to be able to bring the clarity or the insights that comes from having more mindfulness into their daily life. And Lord Buddha explains that mind is the forerunner. We have to make efforts to establish a sense of clarity and a sense of presence of mind. So that's why I recommend a little bit of chanting. Helps to wake up the mind. Get up, wash your face, brush your teeth, do some chanting, and then do whatever your practice is, whatever your formal meditation practice is. And people who can do this, and then the other thing which is important is that we then set the resolution. We have the determination. I am determining to be mindful in my daily life. So we have, for our mindfulness to grow in strength and resilience, we have to set the intention to carry it into our activities and carry it into our every posture. And the people who do this tend to notice that their mind does develop more clarity, where they have been impatient and spoken harshly when having a reaction. Sometimes they're able to stop themselves in the beginning halfway through. To say, okay, stop it, don't say this. As one continues with the daily meditation practice, meditates more and more, that sense of presence of mind and clarity and recognizing thoughts, emotions, sense contact, the way that affects the mind, that gets better and better. And we're able to be aware when there's an unpleasant feeling, an unskillful mind state, and we're able to restrain the unskillful speech or the unskillful. So as the text was saying, the drawback of having a lot of hatred is eventually you might kill somebody. Lesser degrees, harsh speech, of some physical violence. But the more mindfulness we have, when we're able to know an unpleasant sensation know an unskillful mind state, and then we're able to set the intention that I am going to be patient. Now, the thing about patience, understanding patience as a wonderful quality to have in modern life, it doesn't just come about because you understand as a concept that it would be a good thing. The way that patience develops is through practicing being patient. And one of the most wonderful advantages or benefits of meditation is just that. When you come to meditate, there will be normally some of the 5 hindrances: the sensual craving, the irritation, the aversion, some sloth, some torpor, some sleepiness, some restlessness, some worry, anxiety, or some doubts. That's normal for most people. You come to do your meditation, there will be some of the 5 hindrances present. And when we meditate, suppose, for example, we're taking the breath meditation, we are practicing patience with the hindrances. We're trying not to follow them. We're inclining the mind to give its interest to the feeling of the breath, and we're knowing thoughts and trying to drop them, not pick them up and continue with them. So most people have the experience when they come to meditate that sometimes there's very unpleasant mind states. Sometimes there's unpleasant feelings. But when we have a committed daily practice, what happens is we get practice at patiently enduring with the unpleasant feelings that come from an unpleasant mind state. We get practice at patiently enduring with the unpleasant feelings that come from a body when it's sitting still. And this develops the capacity to be patient, especially if you do it daily. You've literally started your day practicing being patient with some unpleasant phenomenon. And as we continue to practice and we do more and more practice, that capacity deepens. And it's really wonderful to have practiced patience with unpleasant mind states, because when you go into your workplace or to places where there might be challenging relationships, difficult things, when somebody says something you don't like, there's an unpleasant perception, there's a painful feeling in the mind, but there's the capacity to be aware of it and not act compulsively or impulsively. One can be aware of unpleasant feelings without reacting. With regards to another very powerful tool, which is talked about in the Visuddhimagga, that cultivation of the first Brahma Vihara, the loving kindness practice. Another practice I like to recommend is that suppose you're doing half an hour of breath meditation. If you do 5 to 10 minutes of loving kindness meditation first, that's with breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may all beings be well, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may all beings be well. Because as this text seems to suggest, in cultivating loving kindness, you need to have patience. I would suggest the same is also true. When you have vice versa, when you have loving kindness, patience becomes much more possible. How so? In terms of being practical. If you've trained yourself to hold loving kindness in your heart area for 5 to 10 minutes every morning, and then you've trained yourself to develop clarity, greater presence of mind by being with one meditation object, normally the breath in Thai Buddhism, then when you are in contact with an unpleasant person or unpleasant phenomenon, at that time when you notice there's a feeling of suffering, you can spread loving kindness to yourself, which is the first stage of the cultivation of metta. Breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may I be happy, breathing in, may I be well, breathing out, may I be happy. So when we develop loving kindness for all sentient beings, we understand that we are one of them also, conventionally speaking. And when we meet with unpleasant feelings and some suffering, that is a time to have loving kindness for oneself. One doesn't stop there, of course. One cultivates loving kindness for more and more beings, eventually all beings. But we do need to become adept at that very first step, because when we come in touch with unpleasant phenomenon, if we're able to bring up the loving kindness in one's own heart for oneself in that moment, then you have loving kindness in the heart area. And then it becomes possible eventually to radiate it to the difficult person. Once you have the kind of strength, the inner strength, the ability to do that, once you have loving kindness for yourself and you have loving kindness for more of the easy to have loving kindness category and the neutral beings, eventually you are able to radiate loving kindness to the difficult person while you're having the difficult exchange with them. And obviously that creates the possibility to be much more patient. So in terms of increasing our patience, I'm a meditation monk, so I'm going to talk about meditation, longer sessions. When you maybe you want to do it once a week as a challenge. Suppose you sit for 45 minutes once a day. Maybe once a week you do an hour and a half. Because you will get your chance to practice patience with your mind states, patience with the restlessness, patience with the pain, and you'll be increasing that capacity to be patient. And then the drawbacks of not being patient, of course, is we get more reactive. When we are more reactive, we think unskillful things, we say unskillful things, we make bad karma for ourselves. And the benefits of being patient is that we make much less bad karma. And as we cultivate the mindfulness and we cultivate the metta, we generate much more merits. And those powerful merits that come from, and Lord Buddha explained that the merit that comes from mental cultivation, from the meditations and the contemplation, is superior, more powerful than the merit that comes from giving of things, giving of time, and even keeping the ethical precepts. But we practice generosity, we practice ethics that supports mental cultivation, the clarity and the peacefulness. But the merit that comes from cultivating clarity, cultivating peace, cultivating loving kindness, that's the kind of merit that will support the deepening of insight, the deepening of samadhi. The merit that comes from mental cultivation will support the deepening of mental cultivation, will sow the causes for your future liberation. So just to rehash, in the Visuddhimagga, please have a look at it. Look at all those wonderful subjects of meditation, recollecting the Buddha and his qualities, practicing breath meditation, cultivating loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, ways to contemplate which gives rise to more equanimity, understanding the jhanas, understanding all of these different wholesome objects that we can take as our meditation object. Earth element, water element, fire element. There's a description of the kasinas as well, which colors people can contemplate and what the benefits are of that. There's even practices like Devanusati, recollecting beings in heaven realms and rejoicing in the goodness that led them there. When we can get kind of stuck in our habits, stuck in a bit of a rut, and sometimes we don't realize how many skillful means Lord Buddha gave us, how many resources are there, how many meditation practices he actually recommended. Everybody has a slightly different character. So just going through and having a glance and seeing is, perhaps one of these will be helpful to me, perhaps one of these will be complementary, useful, and can try a new practice. So I myself have done quite a bit of the corpse contemplation, cemetery contemplations. I recorded a guided meditation on the charnel ground meditation to help others deepen in that practice. And the metta practice of taking the instructions from the Visuddhimagga. So I'm very grateful to Buddhaghosa, Vedantacharya Buddhaghosa. I've been to the great monastery where he apparently wrote the text 1600 years ago. I've been there in Sri Lanka in Anuradhapura as a pilgrimage, active pilgrimage, very beautiful, wonderful place. And so I hope something I've said may have been useful to you. Please look at the text. Please commit to your daily meditation practice. That will help you to have more patience. And then you and those around you will derive great benefit from that. Wishing you all well. May we all grow in Dhamma.
Thank you very much, Venerable Achalo, for your very interesting and insightful explanation and, of course, your advice for our, the participants. The meaning of Achalo in Pali means the unshakable one. So he's been an unshakable one as a great practitioner. So Venerable gave us a very excellent talk. And after our second speaker, Venerable Dr. Barry Kerzin gave his speech, and then we can have a feedback of the both talks. So at this moment, I am going to invite our second speaker, Venerable, Dr. Barrier or Barrier Kerzin, to give his speech. So before that, I want to give a short biography of Venerable Dr. Barrier Kerzin. Actually, if I give a full biography or the full introduction to Venerable Dr. Kerzin, I hope that we have to call for another forum because he is a great monk with a lot of experience, and so a lot of works and so on. So anyhow, I will give a short introduction to our second speaker, Venerable Dr. Barrier Kerzin. So Venerable Dr. Kerzin was born in Hollywood. Everyone of us know what was Hollywood, in Southern California in 1947. He is a medical doctor turned Buddhist monk, but he is practicing both at the moment. Basically, he resides Dharamshala, India. Venerable Dr. Kerzin obtained his first degree in philosophy from the University of California at Berkeley. Then he pursued his medical degree from the University of Southern California in 1976. In his early childhood, he experienced that people become helpless when they get sick. So he wanted to be a doctor, a medical doctor, in the future to attend the sick, as same as, Venerable Shantideva. He also had a great compassion towards all beings. So our speaker, Venerable, also had a great compassion towards all beings to attend the sick. So it is said that he had a great wish to be a doctor to treat the people. This compassionate thought made him a doctor and served in the US as a medical doctor. And then he became an assistant professor of medicine at the University of Washington School of Medicine from late 1985 to early 1989. He traveled to Buddhist countries like Sri Lanka, India, Nepal in search of Buddhism, and decided to be a personal physician to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. After a great observation of Buddhist teaching and practice, he decided to enter the Buddhist order of monks and received full ordination in the Vajrayana tradition in 2003. Venerable Dr. Kerzin remains as a personal physician to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So he is known as the Dalai Lama's doctor. Dalai Lama's doctor. He is a great Buddhist scholar and a meditator. The interesting thing is that he has volunteered as a research subject, and his brain has been studied at both Princeton and the University of Wisconsin Medicine. So I can say that he is a monk with a peaceful and pure mind, who is very, very suitable and fit to talk to you today on patience. As a renowned Dhammic educator, he is popular among Buddhists in Japan, Hong Kong, Russia, Mongolia, Korea, Europe, and North America. As a doctor and a Buddhist scholar, he had a visiting professorship at the Central University of Tibetan Studies, Varanasi, India. And at the University of Hong Kong, he was appointed visiting professor of medicine. for 2014 and 2015, and was made an honorary professor at the Center of Buddhist Studies at the same university. That means at the University of Hong Kong, where I studied as well. But unfortunately, I didn't get chance to, learn under him by that time. So this is a short biography to our great speaker, Venerable Master Barry Kerzin. So without spending much time, I'm going to invite Venerable to give his talk, and Venerable will be giving a talk based on the Bodhicharya Avatar of Master or the Acharya Shantideva. Thank you very much, Venerable.
Thank you very much, Bhante Chandawimala. It's wonderful that we spent time at the same university, but unfortunately at different times. Thank you very much for that introduction. And Venerable Achalo, it's wonderful to see you again. He reminded me, I think 18 years ago we met, and I remember our conversation in South India at Sera Monastery while His Holiness the Dalai Lama was giving teachings. And we met recently in Bodh Gaya when His Holiness also inaugurated this Pāli-Sanskrit dialogue and conference. I'd like to thank very much the organizers with the intention of bringing the traditions together, having us meet personally, having us listen and discuss together teachings of the Buddha, so that we recognize that both traditions, in fact, are teachings of the Buddha, and we share so much in common. So I will talk a little bit about patience from the perspective of Shantideva's text, written in the 7th, 8th century, a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, Bodhisattva Charyavatara. This text I will tell you about in a moment, but first I want to tell you a little bit about Shantideva. He was quite special. He was a student at one of the largest monastic universities in India. And he was a little different than the other students. The other students rarely saw him. And so the other students thought that he was actually bringing a bad name to the monastic university. And so he got a nickname, and the nickname was Busuku. And Busuku meant the one who slept, who ate, and went to the toilet, because that's all they observed. What they didn't see was at the nighttime, he was on his roof doing his practice. So he got this nickname, and he had this reputation as kind of a, someone that was bringing a bad reputation to the monastery. So every monk had to give kind of an oral exam. And they had a choice. Either they could do something original, or they could do a commentary on a great work. And most of the monks, of course, decided to do a commentary out of humility. Shantideva, the opposite. He said, I want to present my own work. So the monks thought he's going to really embarrass himself, and he'll have to then leave the monastery. So they set up a high throne, not so much for the teacher, but really for the teachings, for the Buddha and the Buddha's teachings. And so the stairs leading up to the high throne were not really high enough to get to the top of the throne, legend has it. But Shantideva somehow climbed up the steps and automatically was sitting on the top of the throne. The other monks kind of rubbed their eyes, they couldn't believe it. And he started to talk. And he started to talk about bodhicitta. Bodhicitta in Sanskrit is bodhi is awakened, and citta means mind, so awakened mind. An awakened mind has to do with the full awakening of our compassion and our wisdom. And so we started teaching about compassion, full compassion, and the wish to become fully enlightened in order to attain that full compassion, which would then be the best way to serve and help others come to enlightenment themselves and thereby get rid of all of their suffering. So he started teaching, and at the beginning of the talk, he started bringing enthusiasm and inspiring the other monks to practice bodhicitta, talking about its benefits. Its benefits bringing tremendous peace that we've never experienced before, a tremendous sense of meaning in our lives, a tremendous sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in our lives. And then he goes on to teach about how we can begin to develop this. And then not only how we can develop it, but how we can then stabilize it so it doesn't decline. And then furthermore, how we can have it actually increase to full enlightenment. And so as he's teaching, the monks in the university are taking notice, and they're beginning to wonder, is this really original? It's something very special. And by the time he got near the end of his talk, he's talking about the Buddhist wisdom, about shunyata. And then the monks realized that there was actually something very, very special here. And when he finished, he actually rose, legend has it, from his throne, went through the rafters and the ceiling of the monastery. And so the monks, feeling kind of embarrassed, they tried to get him to be a little bit ashamed of himself, went out and ran after to try to catch him to bring him back. And they found him, and he said, they invited him. They said, "We're really sorry. We didn't know that you had such scholarly and practice background to describe the wisdom and the compassion of the Buddha so beautifully and succinctly and practically. We'd like you to come back and teach us." He said, "I'm very sorry. I have other engagements." And then they said, "Well, please then write down what you've taught." And he says, "I have, and I've rolled it up and I put it in the rafters of the monastery. You can find it there." And what they found then was this text, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. This text, as I briefly mentioned, has 10 chapters. The first 3 chapters are all about inducing an enthusiasm, an interest, and inspiring us to practice this awakened mind of bodhicitta. The next 3 chapters, 5, 6, and 7, are all about how do we then maintain that level of bodhicitta that we've developed. And then the last 3 chapters in the body of the text, 7, 8, 9, are all about how then can we increase this bodhicitta. And then the 10th chapter is a beautiful dedication, dedicating that all those that are without sight may find sight, those without hearing find hearing, those without shelter find shelter, those bereft of friends and family find friends and family, those bereft of food find food, and on. It just brings tears to the eyes. Often after a retreat, and I've done quite a few, including a 3-year retreat, I do recite particularly the 10th chapter for dedication of the merits from the retreat. So that's a little bit of an outline of the A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. In the sequence of the 10 chapters roughly follows the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections, which are generosity, morality or ethical discipline, and the third is patience, which I'll have a few words to say about in just a couple of moments. And then the fourth is perseverance. If we give up, we become lazy, and we don't continue to pursue our practice as Venerable Achalo very much requested us to do, then we don't really reap the benefits for ourselves and for others. And then fifthly, to develop concentration. Again, Venerable Achalo very much in the Visuddhimagga very much goes into the details of meditation, developing mindfulness, concentration, and then, of course, on top of that, going deeper into the jhanas. And then the sixth paramita or perfection is wisdom. And when the first five paramitas, generosity, ethical discipline, patience, perseverance, and concentration, are combined with the shunyata, with the wisdom, then they become perfections. So how do we do that? Well, the sort of scaffolding or the model is to see the three spheres. The three spheres are sort of dictated by language and therefore concept. It means the agent or the subject, myself, and then some action, be it transitive or intransitive, passive or active, and then some object or place of our action. So those three spheres to be seen as empty of any intrinsic existence on their own, of any independent existence. If we begin to see things that way, then we begin to make each of the five perfections actually a perfection. At first, doing that is just kind of a little bit blah, 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 it's just words. It's kind of intellectual. But the more we become familiar with that approach, and the more we become familiar with study and then meditation of the shunyata, we begin to have some taste that all of our perceptions, what we see, what we hear, and all of our perceptions, and all of our concepts, all of our thoughts are actually mistaken. They're actually fabrications of the mind. They're not the deeper reality that the Buddha spoke about when he talked about the two truths, the conventional truth and then the ultimate truth. They're not the ultimate truth. They're just kind of convention based on language and based on thought. So now let's take a look at the third paramita, patience. And I'd like to refer to Shantideva. I think I have four. Yes, I have 4 verses I'd like to share with you. And the first one is at the introduction of his 6th chapter in A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, entitled Patience. In the first verse, he writes, "Whatever wholesome deeds, such as venerating the Buddhas and generosity, etc., that have been amassed over 1,000 eons will be destroyed in one moment of anger." So this is how Shantideva introduces patience. Anger is the opposite of patience, or put the other way around, patience is the opposite of anger. It also has to do with forbearance, and those were beautifully outlined by the previous speaker, Venerable Achalo. Looking at patience as the opposite of anger, then is a very interesting way to approach patience, because it suggests strongly that all of us get angry, and anger is very destructive. So we end up harming ourselves greatly. We become our worst enemies unknowingly by practicing anger. So I want to quote a second verse. It's verse 12 in this same 6th chapter on patience. And then I'll follow that with the following verse, which is 13. So this will be verse 12 and 13 from chapter 6 of A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And then I'll explain those verses, and then I'd like to dive into some practical ways we can approach reducing and eventually eliminating our anger, and thereby developing patience. So verse 12 reads, unruly beings are as unlimited as space. They cannot possibly be overcome. There's just too many of them. But if I overcome thoughts of anger alone, this will be equivalent to vanquishing all foes. And verse 13 follows on that, a practical way to accomplish that. Where would I possibly find enough leather with which to cover the surface of the earth? But wearing leather on just the soles of my shoes is equivalent to covering the earth with it. So here Shantideva is saying that we can find foes or those that we are uncomfortable with, jealous towards, angry towards, competitive towards, everywhere. If we try to vanquish them, impossible. Too many. But if we work on our own attitudes, our own emotions, our own reactivity, by recognizing our anger and then developing and understanding methods to reduce and eliminate our anger, it's like putting leather just on our own soles. We don't have to then put leather across the surface of the earth. So it's obviously very practical. So how do we do this? So these are some of the approaches that come from Shantideva and also come from His Holiness the Dalai Lama in many teachings that he gives on this beautiful text, Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which is probably the longest reigning New York Times bestseller. It's a classic back from the 7th, 8th century. It hasn't gone out of style, at least in some communities. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that when he travels, he takes a suitcase with him and he carries very little. He carries his robes and a few items having to do with his ordination, and he carries this text. It's a short text. It's around 200 pages in English, and it summarizes the whole Buddhist path of compassion and wisdom. So it's a very beautiful and a very profound and a very loving text. So let's get to some of the practical applications for patience. So first thing we have to do is recognize our anger. When our anger is red hot and we're, pulling our hair out, like the three of us venerables have already done, it's too late to practice patience. We're caught up in the emotion of anger. In order to practice patience, it's very important to recognize our anger at its early stages. And we do that by practicing a type of mindfulness, which is dropping into the present moment and turning our attention inward, observing, what am I thinking, what am I feeling right now? And when you notice any of these pre-anger or early anger signs and symptoms, then you bring a method to bear and practice that method. So first, what are the early signs and symptoms of anger? What are they in you? Take a moment to reflect, please. What happens to you as you begin to get angry? What are your thoughts, your feelings, your attitudes? What are some of the physical things that happen in your body? So we're not all the same on this, but there are a lot of commonality. We often feel frustrated or irritated. We may feel a little jittery, even a little shaky. We often feel tension, maybe in our neck, shoulders, back, or anywhere in the body. Some people get very loud. Other people get very soft-spoken. Sometimes we feel our heart racing, or maybe we're breathing fast. You may have other things that you notice in your early anger. So please spend some time, not just now, but in the future, in the near future, identifying your early anger. And then practice that type of mindfulness, which is in the present moment, observing your inner world, thoughts and feelings. And when you notice any of these signs and symptoms of early anger coming up, then you apply a method. Now, if we suppress those feelings or thoughts of anger, that doesn't do us any good, because those early anger thoughts and feelings, they don't go away. They just stay there, and eventually they'll just erupt and explode. So we don't suppress them. Rather, what we're trying to do is actually transform them into their healthy opposite. So anger's healthy opposite, as I've mentioned before, is patience. Sometimes we translate that as tolerance. So how do we do it? What are some of the methods? So the first two methods that are available have to do with imagination. The first method is we imagine that our pre-anger transforms into a cloud. And we imagine that the cloud is way over there in the sky. And we imagine that it drifts and completely dissipates, completely dissolves, along with your pre-anger. Now, this method is guaranteed not to work the first time. Why not? We've been habituated to getting angry since we were kids. It's a deeply ingrained habit. We don't turn around or transform deeply ingrained habits by just one application, trying once. So we have to be persistent. Again, as Venerable Achalo has asked us to do, is to be persistent with our practice. So we have to do this method again and again and again. And if we do, we'll begin to notice that our anger is less intense and that the frequency is reduced. It's coming less often. And eventually, we'll be able to get rid of our anger completely, particularly as we practice this patience as a perfection, that is, combine it with the wisdom, with the shunyata. So let's talk about a second method. A second method also involves imagination. And this method, we imagine that our pre-anger, our frustration, irritation, jitteriness, rapid heartbeat, feeling tension in the body, etc., transforms into a crystal ball. And we imagine that we're holding the crystal ball, we're palming it, like some people can do with a basketball. I actually can do that also, if the basketball isn't too slick, too used. So we hold that, we imagine we're holding that crystal ball, which represents our pre-anger, our early anger. And then we drop it. We imagine dropping it on a hard floor made of stone or cement. And that crystal ball shatters into 1,000 pieces, along with our pre-early anger. And again, this method is guaranteed not to work the first time, We have to do this again and again and again to whittle away at this ingrained habit of anger, to then transform anger into its healthy opposite of patience or tolerance. A third method has to do with understanding. When we encounter anger, it might be anger towards ourselves. Often it's anger towards another person. When it's anger towards another person, we immediately try to recollect that other person is not happy. Why not? Because that other person might be provoking me to become angry. Now, in reality, I'm probably provoking the other person also. It takes two to tango. But the way I see it at that time is that she or he is provoking me to become angry. People that provoke are not happy. So right away, I know that other person is not happy. And then I think, well, why are they not unhappy? Usually I don't know. Either I don't know them that well, or if I know them well, they haven't really told me. And I haven't developed clairvoyance so I can actually see their mind. So I don't really know what's causing them to be angry. So I think about what are the biggies, that gets me or other people angry or upset. Number one, relationship difficulties. So I think, well, maybe there was a bad word or two in an important relationship. Or what else sets people off? Financial issues. So maybe they wanted to buy something and they looked in their wallet or they looked in their bank account and they didn't have enough money. Or they heard that their friend was let go of their job and they have a similar job and they're worried about job security. Or they're thinking about having a family and they're concerned they don't have quite the finances to adequately support a family, or other financial issues that gets them sort of off balance and sets them off. Or third, maybe health issues. They went to see the doctor for just a normal checkup and the doctor said, everything looks good, except there's one thing that's a little bit abnormal. I'd like you to come back and we'll go into that further. And then you start to worry, have I got something serious? Do I have cancer? Am I going to die? Am I going to be disabled? So health concerns. So right away, when I encounter someone that is setting me off and is angry, setting me off to be angry, I think right away that other person's not happy. And then I think why? I look at some of the big issues that may be causing them to be unhappy and get angry and provoke me. Number one, relationship problems. Number two, financial issues. Number three, health concerns. And just by doing that, and it doesn't usually take more than half a minute or so, my pre-anger that I've identified doesn't get suppressed, but it gets calmed down. And again, this may not work the first time, but the more you practice it, it will. So these are some practical applications, how we can identify anger, particularly in its early stages, and then apply methods to transform and not suppress our pre-anger so that gradually we reduce the intensity and frequency, and eventually, by combining with the wisdom, the shunyata, we can actually eliminate our anger and develop the third perfection, paramita, of patience. So I think I'd like to stop here. I would like to say that if any of you are on Facebook, you're welcome to come and see. We have a public figure page just in my name, Barry Kerzin, teaching the same things that we've been talking about today. And I think I will stop here and leave time for a robust question and answer. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Venerable Dr. Barry Kerzin. And it's a wonderful talk. And yeah, of course, when we had the pre-sessions and the Venerable said that then talking something related to the philosophy, it's better to talk something, in the practical sense, so that, each and everyone can learn something about patience and the importance of patience and so on. So Venerable, yeah, keeping that in your mind, you gave us a very nice, important and enlightened talk on patience and how to practice patience, and what are the ways and means to develop within us. All right, so we can have short feedback on the two talks. First of all, I will go to the Venerable Achalo's talk, and Venerable, you gave us a very interesting and nice talk. So you talk about the importance of the Visuddhimagga as a text in the Theravada tradition. And for each and, every learner or the practitioner, the Visuddhimagga definitely will guide you to practice, the Dhamma, basically, and the practice meditation in a proper way. So Venerable, as a practitioner, of course, the practitioner of the repulsiveness of the body, like Kayagata Sati, and in the charnel ground and all this, as a real practitioner, true practitioner, Venerable has this experience, and through that experience, he talks something to us. And also, one of the very important, the practices or the concepts in Buddhism is the four sublime qualities. So he talked about the four sublime qualities, how to practice basically the metta, and the practice of metta and the compassion, karuna. These two factors are extremely important today for all of us, and also sympathetic joy and the equanimity, to looking at the things with especially equanimity or a kind of developed mind. So that's a very important thing. It is just not only being neutral towards the things, but we have to look at the things with develop mind, without being biased, and in order to be so, we have to practice the Dhamma. All right, and contemplation, meditation, and he talked about all these things, and we basically know that two types of meditation we talk about in Buddhism: the contemplation meditation, or Chitta Bhavana, or Samatha Bhavana. The other one is insight meditation, Vipassana. So Venerable also talk about the exhortative, we call the exhortative Patimokkha, or the Patimokkha of the Buddha for the monks. And over there, the Buddha mentioned that Kanti Paramantattapoti. Yeah, the Kanti, or Shanti. In Sanskrit, we call it Shanti. In Pali, we call it Kanti. The patience is the greatest practice that we should keep in our mind, and that we should practice. And also, of course, when we talk about the 10 perfections and all that, and Kanti is perfection, Kanti Paramita, or Shanti Paramita in the Sanskrit tradition. So that's a very important thing. And it means that actually we have to have a perfectness of patience, the Kanti. And So these are the things that the Venerable basically mentioned. Actually, his advice for us also to develop this special practice, khanti or patience, being away from impatience. Most of the people today are impatient, and they do not practice this patience. Even sometimes they even don't recognize what this is. And we are, instead of that, we are very hateful characters, and also we are very angry, and we have this kind of negative traits or practices within us than the practice of patience. So the patience actually is the most important practice for all of us to follow the Buddha's paths. Without patience, we cannot do anything. In Sri Lanka, we say that patience is the best weapon to win in the battlefield. That means actually it doesn't talk about exact the battlefield, but that means most of the time in everyday life, and we always fighting with each other, arguing with each other, and we never listen to the others. We are very, very impatient. So please use patience as a very important weapon to win in the battlefield or in any kind of disputes that you are having with each other. So I greatly admire our Venerable's talk, and we are very grateful and thankful to Venerable Achalo for being with us and sharing your great knowledge with us. And yeah, of course, we recognize you as a great practitioner and a preacher, and we wish Venerable Achalo to have good health and happiness, and also, longevity, so that Venerable can do your service for the well-being of the Mass for many, many, many years to come. Thank you, Venerable. And next, we will go to Venerable Dr. Barry. And as Venerable talked to us earlier during the pre-sessions when we met, so Venerable really wanted to talk about the practical aspects of the patience. That's a very important thing than going to the deep things or the profound ideas of the philosophical things like that. So Venerable talk about the bodhicitta, and also the compassion as a Buddhist practitioner. Basically, actually, not only as a Buddhist practitioner, each and everyone, has to be compassion towards each other, compassion towards oneself, and also, practicing loving kindness to oneself. That means it's the loving kindness is the opposite of the hatred, right? Yeah, we call it dosa in Pali or dvesha in Sanskrit. So compassion is one of the key points that we must keep in our mind, and actually it's in the practical sense we have to be very compassionate towards each and everyone without having any deviation, right? All right. And the Venerable mentioned about the paramitas, 6 paramitas, or the 10 paramitas, and the shanti, or the patience, the perfection of patience, coming under as numbers 3. Dana, Shila, Shanti, Vira, Dhyana, Pratnya. These are the 6, basically 6 paramitas in Mahayana tradition. Dana, the giving, and also Shila, the morality. Shanti is the patience, and Dana, Shila, Shanti. Dhyana is the practicing of meditation, Dhyana, and then the Pratnya, the wisdom. And then the, Virya. Virya is number 4. Virya, the effort, and also the practice of meditation. So these are the 6 basic paramitas. according to his explanation, actually, practically, we have to look into the anger. We have to recognize anger, especially we have to look into the seed of the anger, the root of the anger, how anger occurs, how anger comes to us. So we have to look at the causes of anger. And if you look into it and if you concentrate on it, or just if you pay attention on that, and then you will understand that actually we get anger because of the problems of the other people or the outer world. It is not a problem of inner world. We destroy our inner peace because of the problems of the outer world. So thinking about that, we should not be, angry or hateful, or we should not be impatient due to the problems of others. Look at the problems very carefully and be aware of, all these causes, or all these seeds, or the reasons for having anger. Actually, anger is something coming from the outer world. Even though it appears within you, there are so many, the reasons for us to have anger. So Buddha, Venerable's guidance, the step by step, and you have to understand it in a proper way. And then you have to transform, right, anger into, the love or loving kindness or peace. Right? Peace. And so as long as you look into the problems with awareness or mindfulness, and anger will not disturb you and the others, even though anger comes into you, but it may, burn the whole world, right? It may burn the whole world if we act according to anger or angrily. Now look at the world, how many people are, making problems towards themselves and their families and the society, basically to the whole world due to anger. If each and everyone practices the metta or loving kindness, or if they are aware of, this anger, and definitely they will be very peaceful ones, like our Venerable Dr. Barry. Yes. And so he asks us, actually, we have to be mindful, and then you can eliminate anger. You can be peaceful. And this elimination definitely will bring you to peaceful status, with patience. So, Venerable, am I correct? Yeah, yes. So, Venerable, thank you very much. And we all respect you a lot. You are now 75 years old. But Venerable look like just only 60 years old. For us, or more than, even younger than that. I want to tell my, all the participants here, Venerable undergo a small surgery 2 days ago. You know that. And you see, even, forgetting his, the pain and all these things, with a lot of compassion and love, he came here, he appeared here as a great Bodhisattva. So, Venerable, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. I wish you and I bless you to have good health, happiness, longevity, so that you also can do the service for the benefit of the mass. Thank you so much. All right. Yeah. So now actually there will be a Q&A session. So I forgot to explain to you or inform you about this in my introduction in the beginning. So now, basically, the questions, will be asked from two of our venerable, the resource persons today. So when the questions will go to Venerable Achalo and Venerable Dr. Barry, and my brother Wilson is scanning the questions and forwarding the questions to me. So thank you very much, Brother Wilson, for your kind service and supporting me. Time to time we disappear from the screen, and we actually exchange the questions between us. So Brother Wilson, is it okay to ask the first question now?
Yes, sir. Yes, Venerable. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, there are several questions already we have received. So the first question is to our Venerable Achalo, but however, both of our venerables can answer the questions, alternatively. And if there are some specific questions, to both of you, and then I will ask them. So anyway, this the first question will go to our venerable. So venerable, could you please explain what kasinas are and repeat the 5 hindrances? Yes. Venerable, did you get the question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah.
The kasina meditations is when the practitioner visualizes a particular color in front of one, and that can be yellow, white, red, blue, etc. And they are utilized oftentimes for the development of abhinya, the psychic powers. And so if the mind can become concentrated on these things in a very powerful manner, it can develop certain extraordinary abilities. Having said that, I would like to say that we don't recommend this meditation for beginners in general. Before anybody tries to undertake trying to develop psychic powers, you would want to be having a genuine insight into not self. You would want to have had, as Venerable Dr. Barry mentions repeatedly, shunyata, some kind of experience of the emptiness of self and other end of the world, of conditions. Because if every now and then in the practice monasteries and meditation centers, somebody has to take somebody to the psychiatric hospital, and it's often the case that somebody's trying to get enlightened or trying to develop psychic powers, rather than developing presence of mind clarity and mindfulness and knowing conditions simply as they are, arising, staying, sometimes ceasing. So they are powerful practices, but they're not recommended for beginning meditators. And if you have a teacher, an adept teacher who can keep an eye on you, if you want to do those practices, I would recommend seeking out a teacher who has some facility and experience. The 5 hindrances, the first one is sensual craving. So that's when you come to sit, all of the things you want, all of the things you like, when the mind goes off into fantasy. So on the subtle end, it's like, I want a cappuccino, I want a latte, I want spaghetti, I want a pizza, I want to go and have a nap. On the extreme, it's the sexual passion, sexual fantasies. The second one is the other type of craving, aversion, the things you don't like. You don't like that noise, you don't like that smell, you don't like this taste, you don't like that feeling. And in the extreme, in beginnings, irritation. In the extreme, hatred, rage. The third one is what's referred to as sloth and torpor, sleepiness, dullness. And so that can be quite extreme, like literally falling asleep while you're trying to meditate. It can also be quite subtle. Something that's called the bhavanga citta in Thai Buddhism is when the mind falls into a pleasant state of sleep, that the person can be sitting quite straight. But one of the arahants referred to it as tree stump samadhi, a samadhi that nothing good can grow from. So we have to become mindful of the ways that sloth, dullness affects the mind, and generate a sense of clarity and presence of mind, which isn't affected by that. Then you have restlessness, anxiousness, and worry. That's the fourth hindrance. And the fifth hindrance is doubt. Doubt can be about the Buddha's enlightenment, about the teacher that you're listening to, about the methods that you're practicing, about your own ability. Lord Buddha described the five hindrances as bandits, robbers. They steal peacefulness. So it's a wonderful list to become acquainted with, because we need to recognize them as such. And it's also important to understand that they're normal. You don't need to go to war with them. You're not going to be able to destroy them yet. What you have to do in the beginning stages is know it for what it is, see it clearly, and put it down. Know it and put it down. As a bit of what Dr. Barry was talking about, recognizing something unskillful and training oneself in recognizing it quickly and trying to put it down. One of the things we do is with breath meditation, for example, is we just keep giving the interest to the breath. We don't keep feeding the thought. We don't grasp the thought. We don't have the next thought. We just give the interest with an attitude of caring, being interested. Just look at the breath, come back to the breath, come back to the breath. In doing that, you put down the hindrances. There's other things that you can do, the replacement by opposites. When there is sensual craving, strong lust, one recollects the nature of the body, the possibility that one might die today. If there's a lot of irritation and hatred, one of the things you can ask yourself is, if I die right now, where will I be reborn? We don't just do death meditation. We can sometimes do rebirth meditation. That can be very sobering. If you're feeling angry and hateful, you want to take your revenge, ask yourself, okay, if you were to die today with this mind state, where do you think your rebirth will be? You get separated from Buddha Dharma and your precious opportunities. With the sloth, various things that one can do, just open one's eyes, breathe a bit more deeply, look at light. Lord Buddha explains, and it's very interesting that Mahamoggallana, the Arahant with equal psychic powers to the Buddha, just before he was enlightened, was experiencing extreme sloth and torpor. And I sometimes like to mention these things because we kind of assume it's just important to understand that you're in good company. These things are normal, and people are experiencing them right up to the point of profound realization. The point is, we want to recognize them quickly and let go of them quickly. With the restlessness, anxiety, and worry, again, that's one of the ways the metta practice can be very helpful. Replacement by opposites. You just pick up a wholesome mind state and hold on to the wholesome samatha practice, the calming practice, incline the mind towards peacefulness, and then continue with the breath meditation. With the doubt, sometimes they need to be challenged because they can be really debilitating. So for example, if you doubt your ability to develop insight or develop samadhi, that's going to be an obstruction to you. You need to have a healthy sense of confidence in your ability. So we have to challenge that. It's like actually the ability of conscious sentient beings is to purify their mind, liberate their mind. Everybody has the same hardware, essentially. You have a body, you have a mind. You can purify that mind. You can liberate the mind from cyclic existence. So sometimes it's inevitable that we're going to have doubts. So sometimes there's a practice called doubting the doubt. It's like, okay, you have this ability to doubt, so you're having these doubts. Okay, decide not to believe that and keep practicing anyway. It's like, but if we can recognize them quickly, okay, that's doubt, that's eating energy, that's obstructing peacefulness. So don't feed that too much. Just keep making efforts with the meditation. So I hope something is helpful there. Wish you all the best in overcoming the 5 hindrances.
Pante, please turn on your mic, please. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Venerable, I'm not sure whether the one who is asking the question really wants to know the the Pali terms for 5 hindrances with English meaning or something.
I think you would be the perfect one to do that.
Okay, then yeah. All right. 5 hindrances in Pali we call Kama Chanda, and then Vyapada, Tina Mitta, Uddacha Kukkucha, and Vichikicha, right? Now, these are the Pali terms. If I give you the English meaning, Kamachanda means the sensual desire. Sensual desire. Kamachanda. Vyapada. Vyapada means anger. Anger. And then Kamachanda Vyapada, Uddacha Kukkucha. That means we have this, sloth and torpor. Sloth and torpor. And then Vichikicha is the doubt. Vichikicha is the doubt. And the other one is the restlessness. Kamachanda, Vyapada, Tina Midda. Tina Midda is sloth and torpor, Tina Midda. And then the Kamachanda, Vyapada, Tina Midda, Uddacha Kukkucha. That is restlessness, and Vichikicha, and that is doubt, right? So these are the 5 hindrances. And if we really want to know the Pali terms, you can refer to internet basically nowadays, and you can get maybe pronunciation, I'm not sure, but these things are available. All right. And actually, there are several questions. So this question will be going to Venerable Dr. Kerzin. This is the question. I tend to get very angry when I meet callous, that means the cruel, callous and rude people. How to deal with such arrogant persons? Venerable Sir. Yeah.
This is a very good question because this is not easy.
Yes.
I think that the way we try to work with the other person who's callous and maybe even cruel, firstly, we have to protect ourselves. This is very, very important. If there's any issue of personal safety, please protect yourself. It may be running away. It may be calling for help. Certainly, it's not to increase the heat. Once we've determined that we're safe, or we think we're relatively safe, then the issue is working with our own mind, our own reaction. When someone is being very cruel or very negative, angry with us, firstly, we try to remember they're not happy. And then we try to think, well, why are they not happy? And so we go through the main things that cause people, including ourselves, to be unhappy. Issues in a relationship, an important relationship, financial concerns, health concerns. So when we go through that, we begin to see the other person is suffering, as in pain. And by doing that, it begins to allow us to be more calm and even to develop more love and compassion for the other person, having recognized that they're suffering. So this is the approach. It doesn't always work. As I said before, we have to be very careful to maintain our own personal safety. If we are in a situation where that might be compromised, to either run away or to call for help or to do something to protect ourselves, if that's part of the issue. If that's not part of the issue, then we do that work on trying to see the other person in pain. And as a result of that, to develop compassion, to develop our patience, to not get angry in return or retaliate in return, but rather to see the other person is hurting. And on that basis, we can develop our compassion. So this is something very important. Doing it in that situation is one of the more extreme situations we'll encounter to develop our patience, to counter our tendency to become retaliatory or angry in response. So our situations where they may be less harsh will be a little easier for us to see the other person in pain and then to develop our compassion. And the more we do that, then we're kind of priming the pump. You know, we're getting ourselves ready for the encounter with someone that might be extremely angry, or even cruel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Venerable. Actually, we are running out of time, so that means I would like to ask our two Venerables to spend at least nearly 3 minutes to answer your question, please. This is the request from the, from our board members or something. Yeah, and there is another question here to Venerable Master Achalo. And here is the question. I know two sides of anger. First, I feel ashamed of being angry because it burns the people around us, but I always have the reason for being angry. Second, I feel of its power when I express the feeling, and there are people who accept my anger. What's your truth of anger? Sorry, what's the truth of anger? How can I deal with it? Yeah, basically how to deal with anger. Venerable Sir?
There are suttas where Lord Buddha describes what he considers to be right speech. And with regards having to admonish somebody, Lord Buddha did say that one should be free of negative emotion when speaking to them. And then one should also ideally be free of the fault. That's more difficult. And then one should ask permission, may I admonish you? And one should also consider the time. Is this timely? Is this appropriate? So when you look at that, just how much care Lord Buddha is putting into this. And the reason is we never know how somebody's going to receive our input or our feedback. People are sensitive and vulnerable creatures at times. And sometimes one well-intentioned comment or statement with some irritation or anger. I mean, I've had many students over the years, and sometimes one well-intentioned comment when there was a little bit of irritation, even if the reason for irritation is valid, even if the person was at fault, sometimes those people can completely lose faith and they give up on training, and that's a shame. So it's like, in my experience, it is better if one has a reaction or irritation to wait for things to calm down, and you can express what you think was unskillful behavior firmly without being angry. And I think this is a huge and important area of cultivation of right speech. It is possible to be firm and assertive without being aggressive and angry. And you explain what you think the unskillful thing was. You remind the person what you think the appropriate standard is. And then you're much more likely to have a better outcome in more cases. So.
Yes, Venerable. Thank you very much for your answer, Venerable. And there is another question, but yeah, either one of you can answer for this question. But you know, the person who is asking this, asking from Venerable Achalo, dear Ajahn, is it normal to have fever after practicing meditation? During intensive meditation retreats, I struggle with sloth and torpor a lot, and usually all day. There isn't a single moment I am not sleepy. So and so, he is asking like this, Venerable. So is there any, good answer for this questioner?
Yeah, so I don't know if this person is sitting. They're probably trying to do sitting practice mostly.
Yes.
And so different practitioners have different karma. The way they experience their body and their mind is different, and we have different levels of the hindrances. So this person obviously affected a lot by sloth and torpor. In the Thai forest meditation tradition, walking meditation is given as much weight and as much respect as sitting meditation. The monks will tend to have monks and nuns tend to have a walking meditation path about 20 paces long. And walking meditation is understood to be a very good way to develop a more resilient type of mindfulness that is less like people sit and they get these refined mind states and then they go back to their normal life and it's all gone. But when you practice walking meditation, feeling the feelings at the bottom of your feet, keeping your eyes open, and there's some sense impressions, birds flying by or whatever, leaves falling, breeze against the skin, the practitioner gets used to bringing a presence of mind into the body while having sight impingements, hear impingements, feelings in the body. And so I would try doing a lot more walking and understand that there have been great monks in the last century who developed jhanas in the walking posture and who developed insight in walking posture. Like when the mind converges into a samadhi state, the body will just stop and it will stay upright. It doesn't fall over. It's quite amazing. There was one occasion where when one forest master was walking on the jungle path and a tiger approached him in front, and then he noticed another tiger was behind him, and he was so adept at his meditation that his mind inclined to a samadhi state, a pure samadhi state. He doesn't know how long he was in that state, but when he opened his eyes, the tigers weren't there. It's one of the benefits of samadhi is that beings can't hurt you when the mind is absorbed in that way. So have confidence that walking meditation can bring just as profound results, because the point is the quality of the mindfulness that you're generating and the consistency of the mindfulness. And so there's certain things you can do. Experiment. Are you more wakeful when you walk faster? Or are you more wakeful when you really slow down and you really try to feel those feelings? In the forest, the meditation monks will tend to walk at a fairly normal pace. I know in the Mahasi side or tradition, they slow it down quite a lot. But in the Thai forest tradition, it's quite a normal pace of walking. And some people, when they get sleepy, they just walk really fast, because sometimes making an effort produces energy. Is it normal to have fever? The other part of the question, sorry, is it normal to have fever after doing a lot of meditation? Yes, people do.
Yeah, he says so, yeah.
Yeah, people do experience some interesting phenomena when they intensify their efforts. I would say that's within the spectrum of normal. I wouldn't worry about it. The energetic body is kind of experiencing the mind and the body differently and can have these various reactions. But once again, I would be interested in experimenting with the walking meditation, because that would be quite grounding for the body and kind of connecting with the earth, and see how that goes. Hope that's helpful.
Okay, Venerable, thank you so much. I think the answer, helpful.
Yes, please, Doctor.
Yes, Venerable sir.
Yes, firstly, I'd say make sure your health is good. Sometimes extreme torpor, of course, it may be related to your meditation, might be something physiologic. So please get your health checked out, make sure that that's all okay. And secondly, I'd like to mention briefly a story of a great practitioner in the Mahayana tradition. His name was Gen Nima. He passed away many years ago. He was one of the teachers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And in fact, His Holiness the Dalai Lama sent me down to see him maybe about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. He was living in South India at that time at Gundan Janse. And he had been in the forest for about 40 years doing shamatha meditation and bodhicitta meditation. And part of the time he was by himself, part of the time there was an attendant there. And the attendant told a story that he was in the jungle and there were lions and tigers that came and sat in his presence peacefully, never disturbed him. So I was reminded of that story when the Venerable Achalo told about this great Mahasiddhi who had a similar kind of experience in a deep samadhi with when he came to more conscious level of mind, or maybe less conscious level of mind. The tigers were no longer there.
Yes, Venerable Sir. Yeah, actually now it's 10:05 here in Singapore. So anyway, there is one more questions. Yeah, one more question. So to Venerable Dr. Barry, this question: how to best practice patience as a caregiver and in preparation for grief coming from separation from loved ones?
Yes, caregivers are extremely important in this world. We tend not to take care of caregivers as well as we need to, and caregivers tend not to take care of themselves as well as they need to. So please value the caregivers and yourself. Being a caregiver, give yourself some time off, refresh yourself sometimes, give yourself some time for meditation, for doing things, wholesome things that you like to do, so you can get your resilience back and you're not completely overwhelmed. Practicing empathy is something extremely important, but it has pitfalls, because when we're practicing empathy, feeling like the other person is feeling, we're too close. We're actually, as we say, in the other person's shoes. And inadvertently, because of that, we take on the pain of the other person. That builds up, it leads to burnout. So if we are able to practice compassion, which is taking a half step back emotionally, still the heart is open, but we're not right on top of the other person. We have some of our cognitive thinking abilities there to help reduce the suffering of the other person. And we also don't take on their pain. Thereby, we're prevented or completely reduced the possibility of burning out. So this is also very, very important. In terms of grief, this is something I've experienced very much in my life. I lost my mother when I was young, my wife when I was young, 7 months ago, my baby sister, and had a lot of grief in my life. To recognize that life is impermanent, that's the nature of life, it's the nature of the world. The more we can recognize that, we can recognize that death is part of life. And then when it happens with others and eventually with ourselves, we realize this is something natural. Secondly, to experience the grief, to not try to push it away or suppress it, is a very healthy way to grieve, so that we can get over it and continue in a very meaningful way and joyful way our life. And thirdly, that grief is actually a wonderful door or way into practicing the Dharma, because it allows us to see life as it is, changing moment to moment.
Okay, Venerable, thank you very much. Here, I would like to thank two of our great speakers, Venerables, our resource persons, for your time and your, the knowledge and sharing with us. So thank you again on behalf of our committee, and I would like to thank to our Venerables. And the other thing is we are very sorry for the participants and your questions, and since we have very limited time, we couldn't answer for all your questions, and we hope that in the next sessions and the committee will arrange the time in the maybe in a different way. So to conclude this session, I mean, I want to say something, and after that, our committee will conclude the session. So I quote something from Venerable Shantideva from the Bodhicharya Avatar. So this is a good advice for all of us. Actually, it's a good lesson for all of us. So we can practice in this way, and then we can, lead the path of the Dhamma towards Nirvana. Right, this is the quotation. Those who falsely accuse me, who harm me, and who ridicule me, all partake of awakening. May all of them attain the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. This is the wish of Venerable Shantideva, and I also wish for all of you to have good health, happiness, longevity, and prosperity, and may all your good wishes and aspirations come true, and may all of you also attain the ultimate bliss of Nirvana. Thank you so much. Yes, Brother Wilson.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante Chandawimala, for the excellent moderation. And also thank you, Ajahn Achalo, as well as Venerable Dr. Berry, for the wonderful insight into the Pali and the Sanskrit tradition. Thank you so much for taking the time in the last slightly more than the 2 hours. And I also thank the organizing committee and more importantly, all the participants. I hope each and every one of you has at least taken one takeaway to cultivate and to practice. So I look forward to see everyone again in our next forum, probably in about 4 to 5 months later. And the theme of the next forum will be on mindfulness. So indeed, this evening has been a very insightful session for me, and I hope for everybody. And have a good day. Thank you.
Yes, please thank to Venerable Mahayano for his great work of doing translation.
Yes, and behind the scene, Venerable Mahayano is actively translating for all our Thai audience. Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Ajahn
Thanks so
Achalo.
much. Thanks so much.
And
Yeah.
Venerable,
Okay,
thank
bye.
you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sadhu.